The champagne hadn't gone warm yet when my daughter-in-law took the microphone and made me disappear. We were at the 20th anniversary party for my little print shop, the only thing I built with my own two hands after my husband died. Staff, clients, a few neighbors in their Sunday best. I was holding a paper cup and a slice of almond cake when Kira smiled at the crowd with those bright television teeth and said, "As of today, Nora is retiring from the day-to-day. Daniel and I will handle decisions, with the family trust taking care of everything. She can finally rest." There was polite applause. Then she pressed a key fob and the access light above my own door blinked from green to red. I laughed because I thought it was a joke. When I swiped my card, it buzzed and flashed denied. People chuckled. My hands didn't. Kira hugged me for the cameras and whispered so close to my ear I felt the mint on her breath. "It's time, Mom. You misprinted the school invoices again." I hadn't misprinted anything. But she'd chosen that story carefully. School deals made people nod about responsibility. My son Daniel stood behind her, not quite meeting my eyes, already tapping out a message to our bank manager who was in the crowd. He'd never looked so tall or so far away. For years I'd told myself their comments were stress. Young people hurry everywhere, but they're on my own floor, with my own press humming under a silk banner that said a quarter-century of trust. I realized I was being moved aside as cleanly as a stack of misaligned flyers. I put my cup down because my fingers were shaking. I still felt useful, you know. Numbers and paper, those were the languages that had fed us after Manuel died. I could spot a transposed digit from across a desk. The shop was small, but it kept 4 families employed. Usually, I'd let comments roll off, keep the party going, but this was different. 2 of my pressmen avoided my gaze. The town councilor who awards the municipal printing contracts clapped Kira on the shoulder like a colleague. "Smoother invoices now," he joked. People laughed again. I felt the room tilt. When the speeches ended, I went to the back office. Well, I tried. The fob didn't work there either. Kira followed, phone in hand, her smile switched off. "Don't make a scene," she said. "Your neurologist appointment is next month. It looks better if decisions were already handed over." "What neurologist?" I asked, though the question felt small in my mouth. "The one Daniel booked after the incident with the numbers." "Please, Nora. We'll take care of you. You can play with the grandchildren, do your puzzles, leave the tough stuff to us." She patted my arm, like a nurse. I almost dropped my purse. I left my own party early. Out on Maple Street, the air smelled like toner and rain. I walked to the corner bakery where the owner, a man with soft eyes named Lupe, slid a coffee across the counter without a word. He'd worked nights when his wife had cancer, and I had printed his fundraiser posters for free. "They switched your fob," he said gently, "because in a small town everything travels faster than a press sheet." I nodded, stared at the coffee surface like it might keep me from drowning, and reached into my bag for something Manuel had told me to carry always, a small leather notebook and a pen. I wrote down exactly what had been said, the times, the names, the way the counselor had squeezed Kira's shoulder. My hands were still shaking, but my letters were clean. When I finished, I turned the page and saw an old phone number scribbled there, a number I hadn't dialed in years. Under it, in Manuel's careful hand, 3 words, "If pressed, call." I smiled at the terrible pun, and then I dialed. The voice that answered was older, huskier, but it still had the courtroom calm I remembered. "Nora," said Mr. Kendall, the notary who had handled our shop's original partnership agreement. "Yes," I said. I think the day we planned for finally arrived. The humiliations didn't wait for morning. They came like envelopes through a slot, one after another, until they formed a pile that blocked the door. That evening, the family group chat lit up with a photo of me blowing out a candle, except I wasn't. Daniel had photoshopped it from last year, writing, "So proud to help Mom relax at last." The comments from cousins and church friends poured in. "You deserve it. Let the young ones handle the stress." I typed and deleted 15 replies. Then, around 10, I received a notification from our bank. New signature authority added to business account. There was a bright blue button to review recent changes. I clicked and saw Kira's name next to authorized signer and my own next to supervisory advisor, non-transacting. The last word felt like a lock clicking. I barely slept. My fear, the one I hadn't said out loud even to myself, sang in the dark, what if they were right and I was slipping? What if those moments when a name hovered just out of reach were harbingers of something larger? I was 69. Not ancient, but numbers had always been my pride, and the thought of losing them turned my bones to dust. There is a particular shame older women know, the shame of becoming inconvenient, of being gently nudged to the side with words like safety and rest. It gnawed at me as I watched the ceiling fan carve slow shapes in the night. Morning brought a new envelope. The town councilor's office emailed requesting a rebid on the municipal newsletter contract due to quality concerns under new management. I read it twice, then laughed out loud at the cruelty. New management was 20 hours old and already being praised for cleaning up my supposed messes. The email had an attachment. It was a PDF of a contract template with the name of a rival print firm faintly visible in the metadata. I saved it to a USB drive and slipped it into my pocket. Mr. Kendall's office smelled like old wood and lemon oil. He stood to hug me like a favorite aunt. His hair had gone whiter, his desk messier. You brought the metal key? He asked. I opened my palm. There it was, the original skeleton key to the file locker Manuel had installed when we opened the shop, back when we were two novices with a second-hand Heidelberg and a dream. Kendall leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said something that sent a shiver down my spine. Do you remember the clause you insisted we add, Nora? The one your brother laughed at? The incapacity trigger? I said, yes, but not the one your son thinks it is. He pulled out a copy of the old operating agreement, the thick paper creased at the edges like a favorite cookbook. He pointed to paragraph 12. 4. In the event the founder is deemed incapable of managing daily operations by a physician or court, authority transfers not to family, but to the successor trustee named in Exhibit C. I frowned. We had written that to prevent Manuel's brother from swooping in if one of us became ill. Who's Exhibit C? I asked, heart thumping. Kendall smiled a thin smile. You insisted it be kept sealed unless needed. You called it your if-pressed plan. Exhibit C appoints an independent trustee for 18 months, the local credit union's small business trustee department. Not Daniel. Not Kira. I sat very still. I had thought of that clause as a theoretical umbrella, something you carry for storms that never arrive. Kendall flipped another page. There's more. The trigger is not any doctor's note. It is a specific attestation by a geriatrician unaffiliated with any family member, reviewed by the notary who holds this agreement. He tapped his own chest. And until that process is complete, no changes to authority or ownership are valid. He slid a letter across the desk. I prepared this last night after your call. We'll send it by certified mail to the bank and to your son's lawyer. It puts them on notice. Relief rolled through me, chased quickly by anger. They've been moving money, I said, pulling the bank notification. Kendall put on his glasses, whistled softly, and started making a list. I added the PDF from the counselor's office, the one that smelled like a rival's breath. He nodded. We'll need more, Nora. Patterns. Timelines. Anything that demonstrates motive and misrepresentation. And I'd like to see your processor statements, the credit card fees. Those are where sloppiness leaves its fingerprints. I blinked. The fees? He smiled at me like I was his star pupil again. Rounding errors tell stories. I left his office with a plan and a folder. On the way back, I met Lupe sweeping his doorway. He looked both ways and handed me a flash drive on a cord. From my nephew, he said. He works nights cleaning offices downtown. He saw something in your place last week and thought it looked off. I closed my hand around the little plastic rectangle. What is it? Camera footage, Lupe said softly. From the hallway. People like to talk when they think the building is asleep. Sometimes the decision to fight sounds like glass breaking, sometimes it sounds like a chair pulled back from a table. Mine sounded like my kettle clicking off. I made tea, sat at my kitchen counter, and started a list with 3 columns. What I knew, what I suspected, and what I could prove. It isn't glamorous work, but then, neither is printing. It's feeding one sheet at a time through a machine, aligning edges, checking ink density. It is repetition with purpose. Revenge done well is a kind of patient alignment. I began with the merchant statements. My processor emails a monthly CSV as regular as rent. I opened the last 6 and noticed something Kendall would call lazy fingerprints, card fees rounded inconsistently, 2 decimals here, 3 there, an unusual 3. 1% on school invoices that should have been on the lower tier, multiple refunds posted at 2:37 a.m. on a Sunday. Who processes refunds at 2:37 a.m.? I marked them with yellow. Then I cross-referenced deposits to the business account. Twice, deposits were short by an odd number, $47. 13, $62. 27, not enough to set off alarms, enough to leak slowly like a pipe behind a wall. The email from the counselor bothered me too. Why give me a rival's template by mistake unless I was supposed to see it? I checked the PDF properties. The author was R. Harris at Tribe Print. Calm. Tribe had underbid us for years. My eyes went to the timestamp, 11:13 p.m. And beneath it, something that made my stomach turn, document last edited by K. Stanton. Kira's maiden name. I knew better than to storm into a room with half a storm. Instead, I did the thing Daniel always teased me for Mom's paper trail pilgrimages. I visited the bank. The manager, Mr. Patel, is a kind man who sings in our church choir. He looked both embarrassed and wary when I asked to see him. Nora, he said quietly, your son said you wanted to rest. I do, I replied. But I also want to review the forms you accepted. He shifted in his chair, then pulled out the new signature card. I read, Change of authority, owner consent by Mark. Where my name should have been in full, there was a shaky N, Patel sighed. Kira said your hand was tired. In hindsight, he didn't finish. Did you check ID? I asked, though I knew he'd done what people do when families tell them a story about caring. He squinted. Kira presented a general power of attorney. It looked legitimate. I asked to see it. The photocopy showed a neat block of text, notarized 2 days earlier with a seal not from Kendall's office, but from a mobile notary I didn't recognize. At the bottom, my signature floated oddly high above the line. It wasn't mine. I took photos of everything and went straight to Kendall. He adjusted his glasses, leaned back, and said, we need a geriatric specialist to preempt any games. He made a call to Dr. Ahmed, a calm, precise woman who treated half our town's elders and none of their children. She squeezed me in. We did memory tests I aced and some I stumbled through. At the end, she smiled, a real smile, and said, Nora, you are not incompetent. You are grieving and furious. Those are healthy. She wrote a letter with clinical words that read like armor. That night, I plugged in Lupe's flash drive. The hallway camera captured more than dust and late-night pizza deliveries. There, time-stamped 3 nights before the party, were Kira and her brother, Ryan, the helpful consultant who had offered to clean up our receivables without ever sending an invoice. They wore hoodies in July. Ryan held a box of blank check stock. Kira's voice was a hiss. Don't worry, Daniel thinks this is about helping Mom sign things. I'll handle the counselor. You handle Tribe. My heart banged hard enough to move the chair. I rewound, watched again. When they left, the camera caught a reflection in the glossy fire door, a third figure down the hall, barely moving. The silhouette of the building's night concierge, Mrs. Voss, the woman who knits between rounds and calls everyone dear, standing very still with her phone held upright, recording. The next day brought the first counterpunch. The shop's landlord emailed a notice. Due to a transfer of management to the Stanton Family Trust, rent will now be drawn from account ending 1123. The account ending in 1123 was the one I kept for emergencies, my quiet fund, the one only Manuel and Kendall knew about. Someone had dug. My mouth went dry. I checked my home mail. There was a letter with no return address. Inside, a single photocopied page of my will, the page that left the shop to my son if, the clause said, he met specific conditions. The if sentence had been clumsily blacked out with marker. The letter smelled like toner. I laughed to spite myself. I was careful with my anger. At home, the kettle clicked, and I added 3 new items to the proof column: Dr. Ahmed's letter, the forged power of attorney, the hallway footage. I called Mrs. Voss. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Dear," she said, "you always remember my rent day. Do you remember where you saved a video last week?" She was quiet long enough to make me think she'd hung up. "Do you remember," she said slowly, "the cheesecake you brought me when my daughter went through the divorce?" "Of course," I said. "Then come by at midnight with a box. The big kind." Every September, our Chamber of Commerce throws a dinner where they hand out plaques and take photos for the newspaper, and everyone makes speeches about supporting local businesses. Kira adored those nights. Her dresses had pockets for business cards. Daniel liked them less, too many eyes, but he liked the stage. I wore a navy dress that didn't pretend to be younger than I am, and a shawl my granddaughter once said made me look like a professor in a novel. I pinned Manuel's tie clip inside my neckline like a charm. I sat near the back with Lupe and Kendall and Mrs. Voss, who had insisted on buying a ticket for the drama. The counselor was there, pale in the stage lights, and so was Mr. Patel, jaw tight. Tribe's owner laughed too loudly at something Kira whispered. Around 9, just after the chicken and before the desserts, the chamber president called me to the stage for a lifetime contribution certificate, the kind you give a person you've already moved aside. I walked up slowly, letting the room enjoy its story of graceful exits. On stage, I looked out at them, my son with his handsome nervousness, Kira with her polish, the men who think they can smell weakness like fresh ink. My voice shook at first. "Thank you," I said. "I love this town. I love paper." A few people laughed softly. "Before I accept, I want to show you a short video. It's a montage of our shop at work. I think you'll like it." I nodded to Mrs. Voss at the back, and she nodded in return, producing from her knitting bag a small remote that might as well have been a sword. The screen filled with images of our presses, the familiar clatter that has always felt like music. People smiled. Then the sound bled into another recording, the stairwell. Voices, tinny but clear. Kira's and Ryan's. The room stiffened. Laughter turned into the quiet breathing people make when they aren't sure which way a story will swing. The words came through. "Don't worry. Daniel thinks this is about helping Mom sign things. I'll handle the counselor. You handle Tribe." There were gasps. Someone dropped a fork. Kira stood, then sat, then stood again. She could not find her smile. I held up my hand for quiet. "We all say things we regret," I said, keeping my voice level. "So let me add context. A bank accepted a shaky mark as my consent to remove me from my own business. The power of attorney they used was notarized by a woman who has never met me. I put up the image Kendall had prepared of the POA, side by side with Dr. Ahmed's letter stating that I was fully competent. Then, the part that made the counselor's jaw go tight, the PDF metadata showing Kira's maiden name on a rival's contract template. I watched him sink lower in his seat. "When my husband and I opened the shop," I continued, "we were naive about many things, but not about family pressure. Our operating agreement has a clause that my son and daughter-in-law did not read. It says that if I'm ever deemed incapable, the determination is made by a specific doctor and this notary, not by a spouse or a child, and that until then, no transfer to a family trust is valid." I gestured to Kendall. He rose, serious, and read the relevant paragraph aloud, his voice steady as a metronome. Kira found her footing like a ballerina who'd tripped. "This is about protecting Nora," she said, voice clear for the room. "She makes mistakes with numbers. She gets dates wrong, Mrs. Voss coughed. I clicked, and the screen changed to a spreadsheet with 3 highlighted rows, the 2:37 a.m., refunds, the short deposits, the 3.1% school fee. "I can forget a birthday," I said gently. "But I don't forget a decimal." Tribe's owner stood red. "This is outrageous. You have no proof of any payment between us," and he stopped. Because the next video, courtesy of Stairwell Audio with a good echo, was his voice on a different night. "You'll get your consultancy fee, Kira. We just need the town newsletter printed in one run cheaply." He sat hard. Somewhere near the back, a woman said, "My tax dollars," and another said, "Shame." Then came the blow I hadn't planned but silently prayed for. It arrived wrapped in the calm diction of Mr. Patel, who stood up unprompted, something I've never seen him do, straightened his tie, and cleared his throat for the microphone. On behalf of First Central Credit Union, he said, "I apologize to Mrs. Alvarez for accepting a change in authority without the safeguards her agreement requires. Effective tonight, we are restoring her access and placing a freeze on any transfers requested by the Stanton Family Trust pending review." Furthermore, as the successor trustee named in Exhibit C, his eyes flicked to Kendall, "Our small business department will assume temporary stewardship of Alvarez Printing for 18 months. A sound rose from the room, surprise, relief, the odd laughter that comes when the queen flips the board. Daniel stood at last, pale and furious, and found some peace of his boyhood voice. "Mom," he said, "what are you doing?" I didn't look at him yet. I turned to the counselor. "Sir, I request that the newsletter contract be rebid under supervision, with all communication public." He nodded without words, throat working. Then I looked at my son. The room went very quiet. "What I should have done," I said, and held out the keypad for the stage's access door. The little light went from red to green. Threats look big when they arrive by courier. The letterhead was expensive, the words thick with intimidation, injunction, tortious interference, defamation. Kendall laughed when he read it. "It's hard to defame someone with their own voice, Nora," he said, then turned to the final paragraph and his eyes sharpened. Here's the real move. They want an emergency guardianship hearing." There it was, the oldest trap, make me a burden, then take the keys for my own good. I went very still. Being needed is the curse and crown of women like me. For months, they had leveraged my fear of becoming the problem you plan around. Now they wanted a judge to stamp it. "Let them file," I said, almost whispering. Kendall looked at me surprised. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," I replied. "And I want you to bring Exhibit C, Dr. Ahmed, the bank, the footage, and Mrs. Voss." But before that, I picked up my phone and dialed Kira. She answered on the second ring, voice pitched low. "Nora, we don't have to make this ugly." "Kira," I said, keeping my tone warm like I was speaking to a skittish customer, "remember when you told me to leave decisions to the young? I've decided to be a burden. On purpose." In court, the air was cooler than the day outside. The judge looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from listening to families devour each other. Kira's lawyer spoke first, pattern of confusion, mismanagement, danger to the continuity of a community business. He produced photos of me staring off into space at last year's Christmas parade, as if thinking is an illness. Daniel couldn't look at me. Then Kendall stood and handed the judge a packet thick enough to be a doorstop. He spoke without drama. The documents did the work. Dr. Ahmed explained calmly that rage does not equal incapacity. Mr. Patel admitted the bank's error and detailed the freeze. The judge watched the stairwell footage twice. When Mrs. Voss took the stand, her hands barely trembled. "I keep this town safe at night," she said, adjusting her cardigan. "People talk near stairwells. I listen." Lawyers tried to shake her. She stared them down like a cat staring at a mirror. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Alvarez, if I were to grant temporary guardianship to your son, Exhibit C would move stewardship to the credit union, correct?" "Yes," I said. "And you agreed to that long ago?" "I insisted on it," I replied. He looked at Daniel. "It appears your mother planned for her own decline better than you did." He denied the petition. Then he did something unexpected. He referred the matter of the forged power of attorney to the district attorney's office for review. Kira's lawyer swallowed. That afternoon, I met with the credit union's trustee officer. We walked the shop floor together. The old Heidelberg hummed like a loyal dog. I rested my palm on its metal flank. "We'll tidy systems," the officer said. "You'll sign checks with us for now. We'll train a manager from your staff. When the 18 months are up, the shop returns to your direct oversight unless your doctor says otherwise." It was fair and firm and, for the first time in weeks, I felt my lungs loosen. Not because the bank would babysit me, because I had engineered it to babysit whoever tried to babysit me. Consequences came like the second half of a rainstorm, soft at first, then steady. The counselor's office announced a public rebid of the newsletter contract. Tribate withdrew theirs before bids opened. Ryan disappeared from town for a while. When he returned, he sold cars instead of consulting. Kira spent a few months posting quotes about forgiveness on social media and then made her accounts private. Daniel came by with flowers and an apology that looked like a boy trying on a suit too big for him. "I thought I was protecting you," he said, eyes everywhere but mine. "You were protecting a story about yourself," I replied, not unkindly. "The one where you're the man who fixes things." He nodded, took a breath, and asked if he could learn the press. I said yes, but that he would report to Marisol, the youngest of our team, who had the steadiest hands in the room. He swallowed that, too. The taste of revenge, if you're curious, isn't sweet. It's clean. It tastes like water after days of bad coffee. I slept through the night for the first time in months, then woke up before the alarm because old habits don't surrender. I made a list for the day. Hire an outside bookkeeper who isn't related to anyone. Set up alerts on accounts that ping me at odd hours. Bring Lupe a cake with proper roses piped on top. At noon, a young woman from the high school dropped off her portfolio, shyly asking about an apprenticeship. I recognized the way she kept her hands close to her body, the way girls who have been told they take up too much space stand. I told her to come on Tuesday and wear shoes she didn't mind getting ink on. If you ask what the moral is, I won't give you a proverb. I'll tell you what I did with my fear. I turned it into signatures and clauses in friends who keep watch at midnight. I let people underestimate me until it protected me. I agreed to be a burden in the precise way that triggered a safeguard I wrote when my hands were steadier and my hair darker. And when the moment came, I didn't shout. I pressed the right keys. I let the room hear the truth. Sometimes, late now, I walk the shop alone and listen to the presses. There is a moment when the sheet catches and lifts, when the rollers kiss the plate just right, when ink becomes words. I stand there with my fingers on the metal and think about the night the light above my door turned red. Then I look at the panel, tap the code, and watch it go green. If you were here, I'd ask you a thing that stays with me. When they try to put you on a shelf, what quiet mechanism have you tucked away that will hum to life when you need it most?